Hello, I'm Carolyn Egeberg, Vice President of Strategy and Communications at the St. Paul and Minnesota Community Foundations. Welcome to Who Inspires Us, an ongoing conversation with active members of Minnesota's philanthropic community, and we talk about leadership, challenges, and life experience. With me today is Wendy Nelson, co-chair of the Minnesota Super Bowl Legacy Fund, and she's on that advisory committee and chair of the Carlson Family Foundation. Thank you, Wendy, for joining us today.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes. So let's talk about the Super Bowl. First of all, it's a big deal for the Super Bowl to come to Minnesota, and you get the honor of being on this Legacy Advisory Committee. So tell us about that committee that you're on.
Well, the great thing about being Minnesotans is when we won the Super Bowl, which was a big deal, all of a sudden the host committee and the leaders said, we have to make this best. They had to celebrate for a minute, but then they started to think about how can we make this great for Minnesota.
Great.
And they thought about the fact it's great to have the game, and there's an economic benefit to the game. But there's got to be something more, because some people will argue, is it really $450 million? What are the dollars, and is it impacting the entire state? So the host committee came together and said, what's the legacy of the Super Bowl going to be? And what's a sustainable legacy? And at the same time they were thinking about that, they realized that Mayo Clinic was coming out with some research that said children born today have a shorter life expectancy than their parents.
Yeah, that's
so children
stunning.
born today have a shorter life expectancy than their parents.
Yeah. That's not right.
That's not right.
Yep.
And as that was coming out, we thought, what if we took the Super Bowl, which has millions of eyeballs, which people are talking about for a long time, so you have a megaphone. Because when you talk about changing health, and it's changing behavior, so you have to change attitudes. So we thought, what if we said, let's leverage a single event into a lifetime of health and wellness for our Minnesota kids.
Nice.
And the idea was born. And since then, we've been working hard. And so the Legacy Committee is really built on this idea that came up with the leaders of the host committee. And we've been out raising money so that we can actually make grants throughout Minnesota, and also have this megaphone to say, hey, this is a trajectory we need to change.
Yep, that's awesome. And so each year there is a legacy fund, right? And so what makes the legacy fund in Minnesota different than what other communities have done?
Well, Minnesota, we're always a little bit different, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I think what makes it really different is the scope and the duration.
Okay.
Most cities, so we're the Minnesota Vikings. We're not a cities team. And so most places choose to do it sort of the week leading up to it. They raise some money, they pick an idea, and they give and do grants. In Minnesota, we decided, well, let's be a little bit cute and creative. It's Super Bowl 52.
Right.
So could we really start this campaign? And really it's a campaign, right? Because we're trying to change attitude and behaviors for the long run. And could we start it 52 weeks out and really have a campaign go over 50? So the duration is different. And the scope in terms of being, going out to rural communities in Minnesota and making sure that we're touched. We want to make sure that this Super Bowl, that everybody feels excited and is glad that we've brought this Super Bowl to Minnesota, because then we get people excited about bringing other things to our state, and they start to recognize the impact it has on all of us.
That's nice. And so when you think about those 52 weeks of celebration that's going to happen leading up to Super Bowl week, what do you think some of these communities will see as the impact of those legacy gifts from the Super Bowl fund?
Well, the impact has already started to happen. We've granted $1 million to date, and actually, as I sit here, it's probably more. There may be something happening. I try and go to as many as I can, but I can't make it to all. So an example is 200 kids in Faribault, Minnesota, who live in a mobile home park. They used to come home and they didn't have any place to be active. Now they come home to a playground.
Okay, nice.
So you see on those kids getting off the school bus being able to be a playground. In Mill Lags, there's a community garden that now has been granted.
Nice.
And so that's generationally, you can talk about nutrition, you have access to nutritious foods, and so that's something that can be built into that culture, and you have it as a community conversation.
Nice.
Those are just two examples of the grants.
Good ones.
But I actually think that it's this campaign over this 52 weeks. We've tried hard to make sure that we leverage this megaphone of the Super Bowl to get attitude shifting so that people recognize, in business you say it's a burning platform. Well, Had you heard that statistic?
No, I had not.
So
No.
we don't know that that's happening. That kids with sugar, with sitting on their computers, that other things that are keeping them from being healthy. So we need to make people aware of it so they choose as a family to change their lifestyles, or the kids understand what it means to.
Right. Well, it sounds like inspiring work. So what's your favorite part of being a part of that initiative?
I think my favorite part of every day in life is the people that you meet. And in Minnesota, it's the leaders.
Yep.
We didn't have to create projects. There were already communities and leaders out there who were trying to get these things done.
Got it.
Our community knows what they need,
right.
and we were able to just come in and inject it and sort of, I think, inspire them to continue the great work they were doing. So I think, for me, it's really been about the fact that we have a community that cares. Each unique community cares.
Right.
And that we've found a way to really think about the broader community. And so, I mean, we did, I may say it wrong, but Sapak Takra courts for specific communities. So this is something that is really broad, and we've really tried to be as thoughtful as we could to be inclusive.
So tell us more about what that means. What is that? What is that term?
Sapak Takra, it's a sport. It's like volleyball, then you play with your feet.
Okay, yes.
But what we wanted to do is, in order to get people to be active, you have to meet them where they are. And if they don't play American football, or they're not interested and they haven't been exposed to tennis, you know, how do we make sure that they have access to the sports and the things that they know from their own cultures?
I love that, because one of the things that we're really talking about here at the foundation is that we want to make sure when we're connecting with community, we're thinking about who forms, informs, and benefits the work that we do.
Right.
So we don't want to be a community foundation that's ill-informed about what the community needs and have us decide what communities need. We want to hear from them. This is what we need. This is what's going to best serve our families and our communities. And that's exactly what you're saying with the Legacy Fund, right? You heard from communities that already had need, the playground or the new sport that they needed some funding for to help bring that to life in their community. And the Legacy Fund helped match funds towards what the communities said they already needed. So that's a nice pairing.
The answers are in our communities.
Oh, yeah, I like that. The answers are in our communities.
We need to, I think, and there's been a shift. And the great news is our largest foundations understand that you can't go into philanthropy with ego. You have to go in to embrace and to raise up the leaders who already are there.
Yeah, nice. Very good. Well, let's set aside the Super Bowl Legacy Fund work that you do, and let's transition over to some of the work you do with the family that you're a part of. So you have a broad history of life experience, right? You're a part of a very successful business. You have been a professional tennis player. You are a very highly regarded philanthropist. You are giving of your time and serving on boards. So help us understand what values drive you to step into those broad array of roles that you've played in community.
Some people will say I have an eclectic background.
Okay, there you go. Let's go with that. Broad. Would you like eclectic?
Here's what obviously by the list, I am prone to say yes.
Oh, okay, there you go. Right.
And I think actually that's a guiding principle for me, because if you believe enough in yourself,
nice.
And this is a message for a lot of young girls and women, you know, believe enough in yourself to say yes. You know, don't discount yourself.
Yes.
So saying yes,
advice.
I think, is a guiding principle. And part of that is being courageous enough to say yes. And making every day an adventure because you're willing to fail. So, you know, I stepped into a lot of arenas where I didn't have all the facts or the knowledge or maybe the resume that would have gotten me that position. But I was willing to go in, and I would argue that I'm forever curious. So you have to be a lifelong learner. That's another guiding principle and something that drives me. I'm just interested.
Yeah, good for you.
And some would argue passionate about everything. I always say there's never an issue that comes up that I say, I want to get behind that. I got to do something about that.
Right.
So those, and then I think for me, you know, I grew up in a family that, you know, the hard work ethic, I think all Minnesotans have that. And inspiration comes from hard work. And I truly feel inspired every day when I'm out there working with others, being inspired by others. My grandfather used to say, the harder he worked, the luckier he got.
Oh, how about that? Nice.
And I think that's true. I think the harder you work, the more inspired you get, and the more opportunities you have to have an impact.
Wonderful. So then as you think of yourself and where you give of your philanthropy and where you give of your time, so we just learned a lot about you, right? Eclectic, inspiring, you like to say yes. But how do you narrow? Because you can't volunteer for everything, and you can't give to. No, well, I don't know. Can you? If you can, why don't you share that secret? How do you focus? Like, how do you figure out? Like, because you got to say no sometimes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, and you have to learn to, because I think with today's problems,
yeah, right.
you have to have depth.
Yeah.
And you have to have these deep connections, because in the end, it's all about connecting one to the other.
Yep.
The solutions, like I said, are in the communities,
yep.
but you have to be deep enough that you start to understand and you start to see the connections.
Right.
But I also find that the more I say yes, you'd be surprised at how serving on Northwestern University's board in higher ed translates or cross-pollinates something I'm even doing in the arts.
Okay.
And so for me, the more I'm able to do, the more I'm able to bring these best practices and other things that you wouldn't necessarily bring to a certain area.
Yeah.
So it's been powerful, but I'm learning to say a little bit.
Really?
You know, I'm learning slowly.
I understand your point about. So now I'm kind of figuring out who you are, right? You're like this broad array of experiences, which is why your board experience is pretty broad. And you're bringing skills and thought to one board that you can then bring over to, your university experience, you could bring over to an arts and culture board. So that is some really nice cross-pollination. So we also know that you have a philosophy undergrad degree. So tell us about what motivated you to go down the path of, I'm going to go get a philosophy degree. And how does what you learned in that experience influence what you do today?
Well, what motivated me?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a personal story.
Okay.
I lost my sister when I was 17. And she had just gone off to college. And so when I grappled with how to deal with that and the grief, and I started to question existence and what better way to go to college and study with the philosophers and ask this question: what is the good life? How do you live that life? And I think through her death, I learned, the philosopher Montaigne said, it's the journey, not the arrival, that matters. And so it taught me so many things through her loss. But it also forced me to live in these questions, right? And to be comfortable with living in questions. Okay. So I learned to cherish every day, don't let any day go by.
Yeah, good for you.
But at the same time that it was okay that these questions were unanswerable. I couldn't get the question, why her, why not me, or why did this happen to me, this terrible thing. There's Rilke I love poetry, and Rilke wrote something. I'm gonna butcher it a little bit. Maybe I'll get close. But spoke to that you have to love the question, like a locked room or a story told in a foreign language. Okay. Learn to live in the question, and perhaps someday, gradually, over time, you'll be living in the answer. Some distant day. Oh, I like that. So philosophy. So I was led to philosophy, I think, because of the circumstances right before I went to college. But it has been, it's been a powerful. I would encourage many to go into philosophy, because you learn to live in the gray area, and we in today's work, whether it's in philanthropic work or corporate work, the answers aren't black and white. Right. And so as a philosopher, you learn to keep asking the questions, keep learning. And we talked about it earlier. The answers are in the community, but it's not about us to tell the communities how to answer them. Well, I think, being a philosopher, you're constantly looking for their voice. You don't want to write their narrative for them, which we so often do. That's our nature, right? We're going to, we see you, this is who you are, here's your narrative. And so how do we start to listen and hear the stories that are true, so that we really start to understand who this great community of ours is, this mixture of incredible people. Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's I love the poem, and thank you for sharing that personal story. So when you think about the best advice you've ever received, or the best advice
you want to give to someone, how would you answer that? What's the piece of advice you've either gotten or received that you'd want to share?
I've been given a lot of advice.
Is that right?
I think there's probably two that I would share. I was lucky enough to be born into a family that was really values driven.
Oh yeah, nice.
And we have a credo, and it goes, whatever you do, do with integrity. Whomever you serve, serve with caring. Wherever you go, go as a leader. Whatever you dream, dream with your all, and never, ever give up.
Wow, nice. Thank you for sharing that.
So, you know, we try and live by that, and it's been powerful. You know, the point is that you have responsibility.
Yes,
you need
you
to
do.
go as a leader.
Yep.
The funny part of that story is that I was taking my daughter water skiing.
Sure.
And it was getting dark, and I said, that's enough. You know, you've tried to get up on one ski now.
Sure.
We've been doing this for an hour.
Right.
And she said, Mom, you don't know. The family credo, never, ever give up.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it worked against me that night because I wanted to get off the water.
Oh my gosh, too funny.
But that was, you know, those were powerful words. And I was lucky enough to live in a family that it wasn't just the words, because you're inspired by words, but really learning comes from watching people, and I watched many leaders. But I think for me, my favorite piece of advice was something my mother shared with me.
Okay.
I don't know how old I was, but quite young. And it wasn't just shared once, and she shared it broadly, as she does. But it was something that touched me, and it reminded me of my role and taking authorship of myself and the role I played in the world. And that is that she said, imagine every day, every moment, every action is like a painting. When you wake up, you're going to paint something. And you do these actions, and it's a stroke on your canvas.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you have this composition.
Right.
Are you proud enough of that day that you can sign your name to it?
How about that?
So if you go through every day knowing at the end of the day that you're going to sign your name to that day, you want to be proud of every brushstroke, and you want to be proud of the composition.
I think
and so that was
fantastic.
Pretty stunning advice.
Right.
And over time, it's changed for me, right? As a child, I got it, right? I need to sort of own my day.
Right.
But over time, I've really begun to understand each of these strokes, each of these connections, even in those moments that you don't think you'll be inspired, or you don't think you're making a difference, that you actually are making a difference.
That's fabulous. I think
she's fabulous.
Well,
so
okay,
let's
just
go
ahead with that. Let's go with that. But I think that's really great that your family just recognized that they have a strong role in our community, and to have a credo and core values that the family talks about is really valuable and has benefit the rest of the community. And your mother's advice of the canvas, like look at the day, at the end of your day, hopefully you have a beautiful picture, and you're happy with what you've done, and you have control over what you did and how you responded, and do you want to sign your name on this day that you created? I'm going to take that advice. I like that quite well.
Okay, the nice thing is you get a new canvas every day too.
Right, you get
so
a
it
chance.
says that you get a chance, right? That you learn from that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So tell us something that you think no one knows. So what's something, or maybe not no one knows because someone's going to know. Maybe it's more, what is something that would be surprising that people don't know about you?
Well, I think you're probably looking for something funny. I think I'm pretty out there. People know that I'm kind of a goofy one. I think the piece that people know that I'm a gay woman, but I don't think people know how that's impacted me.
Okay.
I don't think people know that for a while, you know, I think to live, you have to live authentically.
Right.
And for a moment in my life, I wasn't really living because I wasn't living authentically. I was living in the closet. It was a time where there was a lot of fear around sharing that part of your identity. It meant obstacles. It meant maybe I couldn't have a family. Maybe I couldn't work in corporate America. It changed my dreams until I had the confidence. And I learned that I'll never again let the external extinguish the internal.
Yeah, nice.
And I won't let anyone else decide what my dreams are. And I think it's important for who I am, because a lot of people see me as, I come from white privilege.
Yeah, right.
I come from affluent privilege. I come from education privilege. I come from connection and all of these things. I have all these things in my life that have helped me, but I also come from a discriminated class.
Yeah, right.
And I've lived in that moment.
Yep.
And it did change how I saw myself and what I thought I had access to or the possibility of doing.
Yep.
And so it's something that I fight every day for, is how do we make sure that these young girls and boys who are growing up and have never had someone in their family go to college can actually dream that. That's really important.
Right.
And I've had friends argue with me and say, everybody can dream, you know, but I said, not if they don't know. They don't know to dream those things. So I think one of the big things that I'm hopeful in a lot of the work that I do is that it's entertaining this idea that we can really help shift how people dream.
Right.
And therefore what they can achieve.
And what you see is, like, what signs of hope do you see around that?
I see a lot of hope around that. I mean, I think we've got a lot of work going on in the education system. Yeah. I mean, I can point to KIPP, for example, which is a school that the Carlson Family Foundation has supported from the beginning. You know, they put school banners all throughout the halls and start talking about it when the kids are very young.
Nice.
So that's one idea, right? A very simple, straightforward in terms of it's not just a dream. We're going to get you there.
Yeah,
you know,
nice.
you can. This is going to be a part of your future. So I think that's happening, and I think I'm doing some work with the Women's Foundation, a public-private partnership with Governor Dayton. I'm co-chair of this Young Women's Initiative. Nice. And the cool thing, back to a lot of what we've been talking about, is the answers are in the community. We've gotten a cohort of different groups, so LGBTQ, immigrant community, African American community, who are coming together, combined with research, to share a blueprint for here's what we need. Here's what we need to be able
each
to
community
succeed.
needs.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So that they're actually driving the plan for then what we can do and how we can help them. And in that process, just having the dialogue, just in this research process, they're already starting to think beyond what they thought before.
Okay, nice.
So
that's
part
awesome.
of it's just starting the dialogue and starting to help them see that we can create these pathways to prosperity.
Yeah, nice. That's fabulous. So let me ask this question. How would you describe your personal leadership style? So you get to express your leadership in many different ways. In the work that you do with philanthropy, in the work that you do on your boards, in your role as a parent, right? And so how would you summarize your leadership style?
Well, you've noticed from this interview, I don't summarize well.
You do a great job.
I think with the question answering Mom, maybe I'll start it this way. We talked earlier about sort of these different pieces of me. I think I'm a woman, but I'm a mom. I'm a gay woman. I'm a philanthropist. I'm an athlete. You know, I have all these. There's lots of things that define me. But being an athlete was one of the biggest defining for me in terms of my leadership. I would argue that we should get every child into athletics because it really does give you lots of leadership lessons. Nice. One of them is go for it, right? Being courageous, being bold. Right. One of it is own your own performance. And I think constant improvement as an athlete, you are looking at your strengths and weaknesses, whether it's your forehand or your backhand, and you're constantly looking to shore up your weaknesses but leverage your strengths. And then you're also constantly challenging yourself. So you're looking for players who are better, who can make you better. And I think in the leadership world, that's what you have to do. Yeah, right. As an athlete, 110% is maybe enough. Right. So I think all of those things drive in leadership, and that's more for the personal, how you show up. Yeah. I think, the philosopher, I talked about the Rilke poem, the philosopher in me, it's the journey, not the destination. Yeah. I think those philosophical ideas that you have to go about it with deep human connection and understanding that you are trying to get someplace, but it's the how. Correct. It's each day, it's the how you get there. Right, and so how you respond to the challenges you have and the successes you have. Right, well, and the ethics by which you and and everybody who's working with you goes about And then the mom, I would say, the mom in me says, stop and listen. Because
the children, you want the children to do that, or you're going to do that?
I'm so often, you know, especially when they were young, right?
Yeah.
You're wrangling them, and you stop hearing them, you stop seeing them.
It's good advice.
And I think it's the same is true in corporations or in philanthropy and working with different groups. You need to stop and just listen. Being a good listener is, I would say, 90% of leadership. As a mom, I always try and make sure that I'm not imposing upon my kids, that I'm lighting their flame. I'm helping them sort of spark this flame
good.
so that they can be the people and that they're going to have unique talents that I can't even see. And I think the same is true in my work in corporate America. If you tell people, here's where we're going to go and this is how you're going to get there, all the creativity goes away.
Right.
And I've put people in a box as to this, these are your talents. So how do you make sure that you're enabling people to show you a piece of a talent that they have, that by leaving it open and free? I think, you know, so it's sort of those three frames that I come at things. And I think the final thing, and I learned this from my mom, you have to praise. And even the leaders who you think, they know how good they are. Everybody needs to hear, thank you for what you're doing. That's really good. Thanks for working so hard. And I think with our kids, we need to do it. We need to look for those wins to shore up their confidence. But the same is true in all the work that we're doing. To keep the momentum on these hard issues that we're all trying to figure out how to solve, we have to keep cheering each other on.
Oh, that's fabulous. I want to say thank you. It's been so fun to spend this time with you, and you're doing wonderful work. And we really appreciate all that you do in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was lovely to be here today.
Good. Thank you.